The rain had been threatening all day. Maya Collins noticed it the way she noticed most things. Quietly, from a distance, storing the observation somewhere in the back of her mind for later. By the time she stepped off the 6 train at 51st Street, the sky had made good on its promise. Sheets of cold October rain sliced through Midtown Manhattan like the city had decided it was done being polite. She pulled her jacket tighter and told herself it was fine. Everything was fine. She'd wrapped up the Harmon account 2 hours ahead of schedule, her creative director had called her mock-ups inspired, and she was going home to Derek. 3 years of Derek, who always kept the good wine open on nights she came home with good news. She was already smiling when she turned her key in the lock. The apartment was dark except for the bedroom light leaking under the door. She thought he was asleep. She almost called out his name. Then she heard the laugh, low, feminine, completely unfamiliar, and the smile on her face became something else entirely. Maya stood in the hallway for 3 full seconds. Later she would not be able to explain why she opened the door instead of leaving. Maybe some part of her needed to be certain. Maybe she needed the image burned so deep there would be no going back, no room left for, I'm sure it wasn't what it looked like. It was exactly what it looked like. The woman scrambled for the sheets. Derek sat up. And in the long, horrible silence that followed, Maya's eyes landed on the open laptop on the nightstand. A ring. A platinum ring on a jewelry site saved to a cart. The name in the shipping address field was not hers. Maya? Derek started. Don't. The word came out flat. Controlled. She surprised herself. She crossed the room in 4 steps, picked up the laptop and read the address again. Read the name. A woman she knew had met at Derek's company holiday party 8 months ago. She'd brought them both drinks. She'd laughed at Maya's jokes. How long? Maya asked. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that later. Derek opened his mouth. Closed it. The ring, Maya said. Where did you get the money for it? She already knew. She watched it move across his face. The guilt, the calculation, the decision about whether to lie. Derek. Where? It was just borrowed. From the joint account. She said it for him because she was the one who managed their finances, who tracked every deposit, who had been setting aside money for their future. The account I put $600 into every month for the past 2 years. The woman in the bed had the good sense to say nothing. Maya set the laptop down very carefully. She picked up her purse from the chair by the door, the same chair she sat in every morning to put on her shoes, and she walked out. She didn't cry in the elevator. She didn't cry in the lobby. She made it exactly 1 block before the rain hit her full in the face and her knees went soft underneath her, and she stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and pressed her hand to her mouth and breathed. Just breathed. People moved around her the way New Yorkers do, giving her a wide berth, too busy or too polite to ask. One woman glanced at her with something like recognition, like she'd been there before, and then she was gone too. Maya walked. She didn't know how long. The rain soaked through her jacket, her blouse, the thin fabric of her work slacks. Her hair was plastered flat against her cheeks. She had no umbrella. She had her purse, her keys, her phone, and precisely nothing else. She ended up on the Upper East Side without quite deciding to go there. The streets were quieter here, the brownstones heavier and more certain of themselves, the hotel on the corner blazing gold light onto the wet pavement like something out of a movie. The Langford Grand. She'd passed it before and never thought twice about it. Places like that weren't for people like her, not on a graphic designer's salary. But her legs had stopped working the way she needed them to, and the steps of the Langford were wide and dry and covered by the enormous stone overhang, and so she sat down on the top step and let herself finally, completely fall apart. The sobs that came out of her surprised her. They were ugly and ragged and too big for her chest. She wrapped her arms around her knees and pressed her forehead down and just let it happen because there was nobody watching, because the rain was loud enough to cover her, because sometimes there is simply nothing left to do but grieve the life you thought you were living. She didn't hear the car pull up. She didn't hear the door open or the footsteps on the wet pavement, or the quiet exchange between a driver and a man in a tailored charcoal suit who had stepped out of the Escalade and stopped when he saw her. She only knew someone was there when a shadow fell across her and a voice said, low and without urgency, "Are you hurt?" Maya looked up. The man standing at the base of the steps was tall, dark-haired, somewhere in his mid-30s, with a face that was handsome in a severe sort of way, all clean angles and careful stillness. He was holding his jacket open over his arm, already soaked at the shoulders from the 30 seconds he'd been standing in the rain. He wasn't reaching for his phone. He wasn't backing away. He was just looking at her, waiting like her answer was the only thing in the world that mattered right now. Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand. "No," she said. Not the way you mean. He studied her for a moment. Then he nodded once like that was a sufficient answer. Come inside, he said. You'll get sick out here. I'm fine. You're not. He said it without cruelty, without pity, just as a plain statement of fact. But you don't have to tell me anything. Just come inside. Maya looked at him for a long moment. The rain hammered the pavement behind him. The hotel light caught the silver edge of his watch, the precise crease of his collar. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why she believed him. But she stood up and she followed him through the doors, and the warmth of the lobby swallowed her whole. The lobby of the Langford Grand was the kind of room that made you feel underdressed even on your best day. Soaring ceilings, pale marble floors, a floral arrangement the size of a small car set on a circular table in the center. The staff behind the front desk didn't look at Maya the way she expected, with the quiet assessment of people deciding whether she belonged. They looked at the man beside her and immediately found somewhere else to be. He walked her past the front desk without stopping and into a small private lounge off the main corridor. The room held 4 leather armchairs, a low walnut table and a service bar along one wall. He pulled out a chair and she sat, because her body was making decisions her pride hadn't approved yet. Tea or coffee? He asked. Coffee. She paused. Please. He made it himself. She watched him move around the service bar with the ease of someone who knew exactly where everything was, because she would realize shortly this was his hotel. He set the cup in front of her and sat across the table, and for a moment neither of them said anything. She wrapped her hands around the mug and felt the warmth work its way up her arms. I'm Ethan, he said. Maya. You don't have to explain yourself, Maya. She laughed, a short, involuntary sound, half grief, half something she couldn't name. I wasn't going to. She looked at him over the rim of the mug. You always bring strange soaking wet women into your hotel? First time, he said. There was no smile on his face but something in his eyes shifted, a small, careful thing. I run a hospitality business. Occasionally I practice what I preach. Is this your hotel? Yes. She looked around the room slowly. Back at him. Ethan Langford. That's right. She nodded, filed it away. Took another sip of coffee. I'm not going to pretend I'm fine, she said. But I'm also not going to cry in front of a stranger again. I got that out of my system on your front steps. I noticed. I'm sorry about that. Don't be. The way he said it made her believe him. She set the mug down and pressed her palms flat on the table, steadying herself. I came home early tonight. My boyfriend, she stopped. Breathe. My ex-boyfriend. As of about 2 hours ago. He was with someone else. In our apartment. Using money from our shared account to buy her an engagement ring. She said it clean and quick like pulling a bandage. That's the shape of it. Ethan said nothing. He didn't do what people usually did, the wincing, the reflexive oh my god or what a jerk or you're so much better than him. He just listened. It was the most disarming thing he could have done. I walked out without taking anything, she continued. No bag, no coat, just, she gestured at herself. The sodden blouse. The ruined work slacks. This. Where were you planning to go? I don't know. I have friends I could call. She looked at her hands. I didn't want to say it out loud yet. To anyone who knew me. Knew us. Once you say it to people who care about you, it becomes a real thing. It's already a real thing, he said quietly. I know. She looked up. That's why I was on your steps. He held her gaze for a moment, and she had the strange sensation of being seen, not assessed, not pitted, just seen, by someone who had no stake in her story. There's a suite on the 14th floor, he said. It's empty tonight. You're welcome to it. No charge, no conditions, no expectation that you speak to me again after you finish that coffee. Maya went still. I can't let you do that. You're not letting me do anything. I'm offering. I don't take things from men I don't know. Then consider it a courtesy from the Langford Grand to a guest who got caught in the rain. He stood, straightened his jacket. The offer is open until morning. Front desk has the key whenever you're ready. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, whatever he had planned with that ring, he wasn't planning it with the right person. That's obvious from a 5-minute conversation. He left before she could answer. Maya sat in the quiet of the private lounge for a long time, finishing the coffee, listening to the rain hit the window. Then she walked to the front desk and gave them her name. The suite on the 14th floor had a king bed with sheets so white and smooth they looked like something from a catalog. The bathroom was larger than Derek's living room. The city sprawled below her in rivers of light, blurred and beautiful through the rain-streaked glass. She should have slept. Instead she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the skyline and thought about a man who had no reason to be kind, who had been kind anyway, and who had left without wanting anything in return. She didn't know what to do with that. She lay down finally at 2 in the morning. The sheets were extraordinary. She stared at the ceiling and thought, who on earth is Ethan Langford? Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe to Nico I's Stories for more gripping romance tales that hit different, new stories every day. Maya woke to light the color of warm honey pressing through the curtains and the distant, muffled sound of the city beginning its day. For exactly 4 seconds she didn't remember where she was, and those 4 seconds were the best of her morning, peaceful, blank, unwritten. Then it all came back in a single quiet wave, and she pressed her face into the pillow and lay very still. She had to leave. She sat up, straightened her clothes as best she could, found a toothbrush in the bathroom still wrapped in its packaging, a complimentary comb, a folded robe she didn't let herself touch because if she put on the robe she'd never leave. She finger-combed her hair, squared her shoulders in the mirror, and decided she looked like a woman who had chosen to sleep in her work clothes. Not a woman who had fled. There was a difference. She took the elevator to the lobby intending to slip out the front doors and call her best friend Jada from the sidewalk. Simple. Clean. Instead, a bellman intercepted her with a small, apologetic smile. "Miss Collins?" Mr. Langford asked if you'd join him on the rooftop before you left. "He said to tell you there's breakfast, and that you're under no obligation." Maya looked at the front doors. Looked at the elevator. Thought about the specific way Ethan Langford had said you're under no obligation the night before, like he meant it so completely he'd built it into every sentence. She took the elevator to the rooftop. The garden up there was something she hadn't expected. Boxwood hedges, iron lanterns, a pergola strung with Edison bulbs that were still glowing gold against the pale morning. The city spread in every direction, the park a dark green rectangle to the west, the East River catching early light to the right. Ethan was at a table near the railing, his jacket off, a cup of coffee already in his hand, a second place setting laid opposite him with the careful precision of someone who had anticipated she might say yes. He looked up when she appeared. "You stayed." "I was about to leave," she said, walking toward him. "I know. You had a look about you." He gestured to the chair. "Sit anyway." She sat. The spread on the table was understated and perfect. A small pot of coffee, a basket of pastries, fresh fruit, 2 soft-boiled eggs. Not trying too hard. Not room service excess. Just good food quietly offered. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "No," he agreed. "I wanted to." They ate in a comfortable silence that surprised her. She'd expected awkwardness, the strain of 2 strangers who'd shared a strange intimacy trying to find daylight footing. Instead it felt easy, measured, like they were both people who understood the value of not filling silence unnecessarily. "Tell me about the design work," he said eventually. He'd nodded at the sketch pad she'd noticed tucked between the chair cushion and the armrest, a hotel notepad and a pen she'd apparently borrowed from the nightstand without thinking and brought up with her, already doodling before she was fully awake. She looked down at the page. She'd roughed out the hotel facade, the rooftop layout, the geometry of the pergola. "Force of habit," she said. "I'm a graphic designer. I draw what I'm looking at." "I know. I looked you up this morning." At her raised eyebrow he added, "Your firm's website. Your work is on it. And it's excellent." He said it flatly, without flourish, the way people state things they believe are simply true. "The Harmon campaign, the identity system, that was you?" "Yes. I've seen it in 3 different magazines this quarter." He set his cup down. "I want to offer you something. And I need you to hear it as a business proposition before you decide it's charity." Maya put down her pastry. "I'm listening." "Langford International is opening a new property in Miami, our highest-end hotel to date. We need a complete brand identity. Not just a logo, the entire visual world. Signage, collateral, digital, art direction for the interior photography. The agency we'd contracted pulled out last month. We have a deadline." He paused. "I've seen your portfolio. You can do this." "How much?" He named a number. Maya kept her face still with considerable effort. "That's not charity," she said carefully. "No. It's the market rate for the scope of the project. You decided this before I came up here. I decided it at 2 a.m. when I pulled up your firm's website." Something passed across his face, brief, unguarded. "You're too good to be sitting on steps in the rain." Before she could respond, the rooftop door opened. The woman who stepped through wore a cream Chanel set, her silver hair immaculate, her posture so precise it looked architectural. She scanned the rooftop with the practiced efficiency of someone who cataloged rooms for threats. Her eyes landed on Maya and stayed. "Ethan." Her voice was smooth as river stones. "I didn't realize you had company." "Mother." Ethan's voice shifted, not cold exactly but fortified. "This is Maya Collins." Maya Vivian Langford. Vivian crossed the rooftop with a measured smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Collins. What a surprise to find you here. The word here did a great deal of work. Up here in this space with my son before breakfast overnight." "Good morning," Maya said. She held Vivian's gaze without blinking. "Are you a friend of Ethan's?" Vivian asked in the tone people use when they already believe they know the answer. "A potential business associate," Maya said. "Your son is considering me for the Miami property rebrand." Vivian's smile adjusted by a fraction. "How interesting. Ethan usually works through established firms." "He does," Maya agreed pleasantly. "I'd be the exception. Exceptions tend to produce the most memorable work." A silence stretched between them. Vivian let it stretch, testing. Maya didn't flinch. "I'll leave you both," Vivian said finally, her tone perfectly gracious, her eyes telling a different story entirely. "Ethan will speak later." She turned and left the way she came, unhurried. Ethan watched his mother go. Then he looked at Maya. "Well," he said. "Don't apologize for her," Maya said. "She's protecting her son. I'd do the same." He studied her for a moment with something she couldn't quite classify, respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. "Do you want the project?" he asked. Maya looked out at the city. She thought about her apartment, Derek's things still inside it. She thought about $600 a month for 2 years gone. She thought about the number Ethan had named. "I'll need a workspace," she said. "The studio apartment on the 3rd floor is empty. It has a drafting table. I'll need full creative autonomy." "Agreed. And if I think your Miami hotel's current visual direction is wrong, I'll tell you. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." She turned back to him. "Then yes, I want the project." She reached into her purse, pulled out the folder of portfolio sketches she'd slipped in that morning, her best work, the pieces she always carried, and laid it on the table between them. "Collateral," she said. "For the project brief. So you know what you're getting." Ethan looked at the folder. Then at her. "I already know what I'm getting." She moved into the studio apartment on the 3rd floor that afternoon. She unpacked nothing because she had nothing to unpack. She sat at the drafting table with a fresh sheet of paper and a borrowed pencil and began to draw the shape of something new. Miami in October was a different species of beautiful, humid and golden, the air tasting faintly of salt and money, the sky so relentlessly blue it looked painted. 3 weeks had passed since Maya moved into the studio apartment on the 3rd floor of the Langford Grand, and in those 3 weeks she had worked harder and with more focused pleasure than she had in years. The Langford Miami rebrand was good. She knew it the way artists know things, in her hands, in the specific satisfaction of a line that lands exactly where it should. The color palette she'd chosen was warm ivory and deep teal, shot through with copper, referencing the Art Deco bones of the building without drowning in nostalgia. The typography was bespoke, hand-lettered and then digitized. The brand world she'd built felt like it had always existed, like the hotel had simply been waiting for someone to find its voice. Ethan's creative director had looked at her first presentation and said quietly, "This is it. This is exactly it." Ethan had looked at it and said, "I told you." She'd wanted to be annoyed at his certainty. She wasn't. The gala preview for the Miami property was held at an art space in Wynwood, rented out for the evening, walls hung with photography from the hotel's new visual campaign, Maya's art direction brought to life. She wore a dress she'd bought that afternoon from a boutique on Lincoln Road, a deep rust silk that she'd paid for from the first installment of her project fee, and she felt, for the first time since that rainy Thursday in October, like herself again. More than herself. Like a version of herself she was just meeting. She was standing at the edge of the room, studying how the prince looked in the lighting when she heard his voice. "Maya." She turned. Derek stood 6 feet away in a charcoal suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, holding a glass of champagne, looking at her with the expression of a man who had practiced what he was going to say and was already forgetting it. The world narrowed for a moment. Then it widened again. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I'm with Carlyle Group," he said. "We're pitching for the F&B partnership on the new property." His eyes moved over her, taking in the dress, the room, the photographs on the wall. "You did this? All of this?" "Yes." Something shifted in his face. Maya, I've been trying to reach you. I know. She hadn't responded. Hadn't needed to. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. He stepped closer. She didn't mean anything. It was nothing. You were everything. Or everything. I've been. Derek. She said his name the way you set something down that was never quite the right weight in your hands. I believe that you miss me. I believe you believe what you're saying. But I haven't thought about you in 3 weeks. Not even once. She paused and let the truth of it register on his face. That's your answer. She turned to find Ethan standing 15 feet away, still watching. He hadn't moved toward them. He wasn't performing jealousy. He was simply there, arms loose at his sides, his eyes on her with an expression she had come to recognize, that particular quality of attention he gave things he considered worth watching. When Derek drifted away, Ethan crossed the room to her. Old chapter? He asked. Closed, she said. He nodded. Stood beside her and looked at the photographs. You should know the team wants to use this rebrand as the template for the entire Langford portfolio refresh, he said. 7 properties. She looked at him. That's a very large compliment. It's a very large contract if you want it. You could have told me that inside. I wanted to tell you out here. He tilted his head toward the terrace doors. Come outside. The light's better. The terrace above Biscayne Bay was empty, the party noise softened to a murmur behind them. The bay was black and silver below, the lights of Key Biscayne blurring across the water. She leaned against the railing and he stood beside her, close enough that the warmth of him was a distinct, specific thing. Why are you kind to me? She asked. She hadn't planned to ask it. He was quiet for a moment. Because it's easy, he said finally. You make it easy. She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. The distance between them was approximately nothing. She became acutely aware of her own heartbeat. He didn't move. Neither did she. The moment stretched like something being pulled carefully taut, tested for its strength. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket and they both exhaled, and he glanced down and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I have to take this, he said. Go, she said and meant it. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until 48 hours later, was that the call was from his communications director. A journalist had reached out. Vivian Langford, as it turned out, had been busy. She had a talent for finding pressure points and pressing them with elegant precision. The headline appeared on a Friday morning, Langford's mystery woman, gold digger or genius. Sources say new lady friend has a complicated past. The article was thin on facts and thick on implication. It painted Maya as an opportunist who had inserted herself into Ethan's orbit after her relationship fell apart, a woman leveraging access into a career. Her work was mentioned briefly. The color of her dress at the Miami Gala got 2 full sentences. She read it in the studio apartment on the 3rd floor. Then she opened her suitcase and started folding. Ethan arrived at her door in under an hour, still in last night's clothes, like he'd been up all night watching for this. He knocked. She opened the door. She had the suitcase on the bed behind her. Maya. I'm not angry, she said. And she meant that too. I know it was her. I understand why she'd do it. But I didn't earn this project because I'm sleeping next to someone powerful. I earned it because I'm good. And I can't fight for that reputation while standing inside the story they're writing about me. Let me. Ethan. She stopped him gently. What would you say right now? Think about it. What could you actually say? He stood in the doorway for a long moment. And then he said, quietly and with the particular weight of a man who rarely said more than he meant, that you are the most talented person I have met in years. That I didn't give you this project to keep you close, even though I wanted to. And that watching you walk out of this hotel will be the second worst decision I've ever made. The first was not saying this sooner. Maya looked at him for a long time. Then she closed the suitcase and carried it to the door and he stepped aside and she left. She thought about what he'd said all the way home to New York. Don't miss the ending. Subscribe to Nico I's Stories on YouTube and hit the notification bell, because the best parts always come when you least expect them. November in New York was all bare trees and low light and the particular smell of the city pulling its coat on. Maya returned to her Midtown apartment. She'd had a locksmith in while she was in Miami, and Derek's key no longer worked, and his things were in a storage unit he'd been emailed the address of. The apartment felt different without his fingerprints on everything. Smaller maybe. Also entirely hers. She worked. That was the word for the first 2 weeks. She simply worked. She took 3 new clients using the Langford Miami rebrand as her portfolio centerpiece, and each of them said some version of the same thing. We've been watching this project, we want that for us. She raised her rates. She hired a part-time assistant. She drank her coffee hot instead of letting it go cold, because there was no one in the apartment to be distracted by. She did not call Ethan. He did not call her. She told herself this was the correct outcome. Two people, a clean story, no debris. She had come into his orbit in the worst moment of her life and she had rebuilt herself inside it, and now she was standing on her own ground, steady, clear-eyed, and entirely too aware of the fact that she missed him. Not the hotel. Not the rooftop. Not the suite on the 14th floor. His sentences, spare and precise. The way he listened like it was something he was good at and had chosen. The way he'd stood in the doorway in Miami and said true things without performance. On the 30th day she was fine. Genuinely fine, the productive, forward-moving kind of fine that is its own quiet victory. On the 31st day a package arrived. It was wrapped in craft paper and tied with a single length of ribbon. No courier company logo. Hand-delivered to her building's front desk. She opened it at her kitchen table. Her portfolio sketches. Every page she'd left at the Langford Grand as collateral for the project brief. The ones that had been in the folder on the rooftop table that morning. They were framed now, individually, in slim dark walnut, each one matted in cream. 8 small frames wrapped in tissue, nested carefully in the box. Under them, a single sheet of hotel stationery. Handwritten. These were never collateral. They were yours. That was all. Maya sat with the frames arranged on her kitchen table for a very long time. Then she put on her good coat. The lobby of Langford International's New York headquarters was all glass and restraint, 30 stories of corporate confidence rising above Park Avenue. The receptionist looked up when Maya walked in. Maya gave her name and said she was there to see Ethan Langford and that she didn't have an appointment. She was shown to the elevator in under 3 minutes. Vivian Langford was in the 42nd floor corridor when the elevator doors opened, moving toward her with the look of a woman who had been informed and was already mid-strategy. Miss Collins. Vivian's voice was perfectly smooth. Ethan has a full afternoon. I know, Maya said. She kept walking. I'll be brief. He doesn't need this kind of disruption. Whatever you think you have with him. Mrs. Langford. Maya stopped, turned to face her fully. She spoke quietly because some conversations don't need an audience. I didn't come here to compete with you for your son. I came because he told me the truth in a doorway in Miami and I left anyway, and I've been thinking about it for 30 days. That's the whole story. She held Vivian's gaze. You are his mother and you love him, and I understand why you see me as a variable that doesn't compute. But I'm not a variable. I'm a person who worked for what she has and will continue to. That's all I've got. Vivian looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across her face, not warmth, not quite, but something adjacent to respect. The kind that comes against a person's will. She stepped aside. Ethan's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. He was standing at the window with his back to the room, and he turned when he heard her. He said nothing. She said nothing. She walked in and set the sheet of hotel stationery on his desk. You could have said more, she told him. I said what I meant. I know. That's why I'm here. She stopped in front of him. I rebuilt myself inside your orbit and I was afraid it wasn't mine to keep. But I took the clients. I raised my rates. I have an assistant now. And I still think about the terrace in Miami. She paused. I don't need you. I want to be clear about that. I know, he said. But I want to be here. She looked at him steadily. I want the conversation we didn't finish. The silence in the room was the good kind, full, not empty. The Miami rebrand goes live next month, he said. The team wants to extend it across 7 properties. They've asked for you specifically. I know. My assistant forwarded the inquiry. Something finally moved on his face, the corner of his mouth, barely. And I'll consider it. The terms need to be renegotiated. She tilted her head. I'm more expensive now. I know, he said again. And this time, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. 6 months later, every Langford hotel in America had Maya's art on its walls. Not just the identity system. Her sketches, the ones from the rooftop notepad, the ones she'd drawn without thinking, framed now in warm walnut in every lobby. Ethan had asked her permission before putting them there. She'd looked at him for a long moment and then said yes. She kept her own apartment. She kept her own clients, her own calendar, her own name on her own work. She and Ethan moved toward each other the way people do when they are old enough to know what they're choosing and deliberate enough to choose it cleanly. On a Tuesday morning in April, she stood in the Langford Grand Lobby on the Upper East Side and looked at the sketch of the rooftop garden hanging near the elevator bank. Rough pencil lines, a quick hand, the pergola barely suggested, the city behind it implied. Ethan came to stand beside her. "I drew that in 4 minutes," she said. "I know." He looked at it. "It's still the best thing in the building." She looked at him sidelong. "It's not," she said. He looked back at her. In the quiet of that lobby, in the hotel where her worst night had turned into her first page, Maya Collins understood something she hadn't been ready to understand until now. The billionaire hadn't changed her life. He hadn't rescued her or rewritten her or redirected her toward somewhere better. She had walked out of that apartment in the rain. She had sat on those steps. She had stood up. She had done all of it herself. He had simply been there, steady, certain, and worth walking back toward. That was enough. That was everything. That's a wrap on this story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs it, and find more stories like this only on Nico Eyes Stories. Your next favorite watch is already waiting.